spirit. Literally, he can see through the cameras. That's, you know, IP. Save me. So he can see, and he's with us in spirit, but we don't want to be infected with what he has, because it's scary. And if you know Steve, you know he doesn't get sick, and he doesn't like to miss out on anything. So anyway, tonight's all about blockchain, as far as I know, if the script hasn't been changed, correct?
Yeah.
Just some housekeeping. Obviously, exit is the way you came in. Don't go out the back, that's a big drop. Toilets are just there. Beer, I think, has run out from last time, but there's more coming. So never fear. And the pizza is probably almost gone. Probably. No, so if you need anything, I'm Shanti or Barbara with a stripy shirt down the back. Yeah. And Peter is going to talk about intro to blockchain, yeah?
Intro to blockchain. Thanks, Shanti. Give a round of applause to Shanti. Thanks for having us. Yeah, and as Shanti said, unfortunately Steve can't be here, but as you can see a look around, this is Steve and Shanti's consciousness. So this is their playground, their hacker space, and amazing things happen here, and the news has been covering quite a bit, so we're looking forward to working with them. I just want to do a shout out for the SingularityU Australia folks that are in the room. We got Nicole, Michelle, Joey back there, Nanaraj and Elise. Yeah, give them a warm welcome as well. So if you don't know already, there's a big SingularityU Australia Summit happening on the 22nd and 23rd of October, and Future Factory will be there to showcase some of the latest implantables, wearables, and also hearables and things like that. But today, we'll be talking about the future of blockchain, and it's going to be on building a post-blockchain world. So what does that mean? You know, what is a post-blockchain world? Well, if you think about what you typically understand about blockchain, you refer back to the cryptocurrency of Bitcoin, right? And you look at this price chart of Bitcoin, you know, back 4 years ago or so, and it goes through this sort of flattening phase initially. No one's ever heard of the thing. Maybe a mate of yours in the garage has been working in mining these things. You're like, what is he, a digital gold miner, right? And then all of a sudden the business starts picking up. You see a lot of hype behind it, and you see the prices rise because people are actually able to trade on sort of these Bitcoins. And then all the hype gets to a point where it's like, oh crap, what do we do with this, right? What do we do with blockchain? We can do anything we want. And then that's the peak of the hype, and it goes through that curve of disillusionment because they realize practically from a business perspective, it's really just digital gold. Like, it's a store of value for Bitcoin, and the businesses that are trying to build it using blockchain are pretty much just using database technology. You know, at the end of the day, Bitcoin and blockchain, these are the sort of things that have gone through this hype cycle, the Gartner hype cycle. Put your hands up if you've heard of the Gartner hype cycle. This is the trends of typical emerging technologies, right? So, you know, flip between the two, and the trends look pretty much the same, right? We potentially might be on this plateau of productivity, as, you know, the Bitcoin and blockchain enthusiasts might tell you. But that's still up for debate, right? That's still up to debate. At the end of the day, if you think about blockchain and, you know, they're called distributed ledger technology, all it is, you just think about it as a Google Sheet on steroids. You know, everyone's got access and see the transparency of the transactions on it. You can see everything, right, that's happening. And this is how we actually get to that sort of slope of enlightenment as more and more people become aware and actually find real business use cases. And we'll hear about what a post-blockchain might look like through Nathan Waters later today. That's actually might get us some actual productivity out of it. But how is this relevant to transhumanism? How many of you actually heard of transhumanism before even coming here? So good, yeah, great, fantastic. And who was first time at this meetup in this room? Oh, that's a great share, fantastic. Thanks for coming along. And welcome back to the ones that have come back before. But transhumanism, just to give a brief update, is about the integration of humanity and technology. So how do we transcend the limitations of our human biology with technology? And you know, these three pillars that you see up here is super well-being, super longevity, and super intelligence. These are the three core pillars of how to use technology to transcend these limitations. So for example, in longevity, how do we live longer, healthier, and happier? For intelligence, how do we enhance our intelligence using, say, smartphones even? But then going beyond that is how do we integrate the technologies, as you heard, from brain-computer interfaces. Yep. Go back here.
No,
Is it feedback? Go back. That's right. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, so yeah, brain-computer interfaces, as Shanti was alluding to earlier, and there's also things like just wearables and hearables, just understanding what's coming out of your body. And super well-being, you can also think on blockchain is how do we create abundance? So how do we actually create all this sort of decentralize and distribute and also democratize these technologies to create well-being for humans? And one example is, say, your health data. So this is an example of nebula genomics in the US. So the challenge right now for individuals when you're doing these DNA tests like 23andMe and you would have heard of also Ancestry DNA. So these companies essentially extracting from your data and selling that on to pharma companies or insurance companies, if that's worse. And your 23andMe got a big investment from GSK last year, billions of dollars, so they can actually sell $500 million to actually be able to use that data and screen for more genetic diseases, but actually using that data, your personal data, to create new medicines. I mean, that's a good cause, but at the end of the day, shouldn't you have a say of how your data is being used? And that's what genomics, nebula genomics is essentially doing. It's democratizing genomic data via the nebula blockchain. So instead of you as an individual selling to a company like 23andMe and then on selling that to a pharma company and you paying for that privilege, Nebula Genomics gives you a token for essentially exchanging that genetic data, and then you can use those tokens to then on-sell that to the pharma companies. And you actually get to say in what type of data you actually share. In the sense of super intelligence, trying to actually create safe AI. This is a company called SingularityNet. They're essentially creating a decentralized marketplace for artificial intelligence. Ben Goetzel, who heads it up based in Hong Kong, is essentially trying to take away what the big tech companies have in terms of the power and control of AI that they currently have because of the enormous amount of data that they have to train the machine learning algorithms. And to create this decentralized marketplace for AI, anyone can put up their own AI algorithms and monetize that through the marketplace. And that way, it's decentralizing and distributing that ability to monetize your AI and also in turn share that data. So tokenomics is one of the things we'll be talking about later today. I'm sure Nathan will put that to shame too using peer-to-peer technologies, but this is an example where you can actually democratize AI and not keeping it locked into these big tech companies like Amazon and Google and Microsoft. And finally, it's also democratizing governance itself. So this is a company, this is a technology called SecureVote, essentially putting blockchain, using blockchain to create scalable and reliable blockchain voting platform. Right? It's used by Flux, the political party. It's actually on the platform of using SecureVote to say, we want to do direct democracy. Right? So think about all those policies that are out there that's debated by the major parties, but at the end of the day, they're never really talking on your behalf. I mean, Flux is trying to create, using SecureVote, give you the ability to vote on every single individual policy. For example, if you're for marriage equality, okay, that particular policy, you'll have a direct say in yes or no. And that then is in turn democratized throughout all the members of that particular party. And if a party member gets elected in the federal system, whether it's in the House of Reps or the Senate, that person will need to vote for that particular policy based on the majority on the members. And if they don't, well, then there is a clause to essentially get them out of the job. So this actually creates a mechanism, using SecureVote to do that. So yeah, check it out, Flux. Vote Flux as well. And this is SingularityU. So we're talking about abundance, and Singularity University is based in the US, but they have an Australian chapter in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane and Canberra, and we've got a few others, don't we, as well coming up. Newcastle, of course. Singularity University is all about how do we use exponential technologies, like blockchain, to actually create abundance. And we'll be hearing more about it at the summit. But essentially, the Australian chapters will be able to make this democratized in terms of Australia, and having attendance in all these meetups and securing events as well. So, without further ado, I want to introduce Nathan Waters. Nathan will be speaking tonight. Oh, sorry, before that, Anuraj, would you like to have a quick word on what's coming up for the summit as well?
Okay, yeah, sure.
I'll pass you this.
That's okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So hi everyone. I just returned from Silicon Valley, and we had the leadership forum and the global summit. in San Francisco, and we've just actually moved the headquarters from the NASA Ames Research Center to Santa Clara, a massive, wonderful building which everybody's welcome to go and visit actually. So yeah, the summit was quite an awakening, and in fact even the leadership forum, really an awakening event. We had Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil, the two co-founders, who shared some really good enlightening talks about the rate of exponential change, which is again accelerating very fast. Then we had some really good talks by, quite in-depth talks by David Roberts, who talks a lot about ethics and really that one person can change so much and actually impact the world. So we've got something called the Global Grand Challenges and the Global Impact Challenge. We've also got the Global Startup Program at the SingularityU, and Australia is actually coming on board as the 8th global country partner. So we're very proud to be part of that. Newcastle was the first chapter. We've had the Sydney chapter. In fact, I'm on the leadership team of the Sydney chapter now. And we've had 2 meetings already. We've got some more coming up. We'd love to encourage you. And we're trying to do a really cross-pollination across a lot of meetups. And Transhumanism is certainly one of the key meetups, along with design thinking, which I was speaking at last time, and a few others where we really see that there's a lot of areas to cross-pollinate across. Then we had obviously Ray Kurzweil giving a lot more about singularity is near, and updates on where he sees obviously next 10 years where we're seeing a lot more closer to the big day. And I would say other key talks, something which left me quite an impact was also this gentleman Amin Tofani, who talks about exonomics, which is exponential economics, and he really talks a lot about the digital twin. In fact, a lot of his talks are available online, so you would encourage you to go and have a look even on Amin Tofani, his name is. He's going to be one of our key speakers also at the summit here in Australia. In fact, if people who want any more information, I've got cards here. We'll leave it up here in the front for the summit. But of course, as you're hearing a lot about it already, I think that's a quick update there. So, yeah.
They can also go onto the website to get the newsletters as well.
That's right. Yeah, go on the website, SingularityUStraliaSummit.com. Check it out. There we go. And and for Nathan, I've known Nathan since like Deloitte days. We were doing some innovation work, and Nathan would come and host the Ethereum Sydney meetups. And he's come a long way since then. He's running a company Peerism and Web3 Sydney, and he's also for Holochain Social Impact in Sydney as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause for Nathan.
Cool. Yeah, so what?
You want to present?
Yeah, I'm going to see my comments. Oh, they're not on my screen.
Your comments should be there.
Ah, right, okay.
That's it. Dual screen.
Feedback monitor. Yeah.
That's cool. No, they're not. They're all.
No?
That's alright, I'll just wing it.
Should do.
Yeah, so I'm Nathan. Hello. I haven't given a talk in a while, so this will be interesting. So my background is startups and blockchain and crypto and community organizing. I first got into crypto when I was mining bitcoins in 2010 when they were 50 cents each. Me and a mate back in university days in a share house were getting like 1 bitcoin per day, and they'll just play money, like we're basically like paying each other in bitcoins to pay off like house bills and stuff like that. So that was when nobody thought it would go anywhere, because there were like tons of different coins that were like failing all the time. Like I mined Kanye coin at the time, which was really cool. So nobody thought it would go anywhere. Yeah, and then Ethereum came around, and so in 2014 I launched the Ethereum meetup, which became the largest, pretty much the largest like Ethereum meetup, maybe the 6th largest in the world or something like that. It was like 3,000 members, so that was pretty fun. And of course I lost all my Bitcoins, so I didn't make any money off it, because I never went into this wanting to make money. I was interested in this to like try and change the world for the better. So I'm not like all those pricks that just try to make money off it. And I will preface this talk with, if I offend anyone, sorry, that's kind of like my style. And this talk is very much like an antagonistic type, polarizing type talk. I've seen lots of, maybe like 10 different people talk about blockchain so far, and typically the talks are very much like explanatory. And if you're not from the crypto space, you'll probably pick up on Holochain quite quickly. If you are from the crypto space, anyone who here is like kind of into crypto and blockchain like quite heavily, yes. So I tend to find like blockchain people are really like they're being almost like indoctrinated in a way into like these certain memes around like consensus is necessary and like you've got to solve the double spend problem and all these problems. So Holochain kind of gets around that. So what I wanted to do is like a direct side-by-side comparison. So although these are kind of very antagonistic, but I think it's a good way to kind of learn along the way. So basically on the left, the dark side is blockchain, and the light side is Holochain. So this is a good start. Blockchain is blockchain. It's a platform. It has a global ledger. It's got mining. It's got global consensus. It's got a core token. There's transaction fees. There's transaction per second limits, and there's scaling issues. And Holochain has none of those. The end. No, I'll keep going. So blockchain is kind of really easy to understand once you kind of grasp some core concepts. And the way you kind of go about developing on blockchain it's really no different than just doing a stock standard game theory startup where you're just trying to extract value, you're just trying to make money. It's all about like profit, it's all about competition, it's all about greed. And it's basically the typical extractive financial system that we have today that we all just kind of go along with. It's hyper-capitalism, it's a standard, stock standard thing. Whereas Holochain is much more about like generative ecosystems, about collective intelligence, about abundance. It's a really deep rabbit hole. So this is a big thing to kind of understand, like what the difference between a platform and a pattern. So a platform is something that you kind of access. It's this thing that exists that you kind of like, you go to and you use. So Twitter and Facebook, they're things you go to and use, and once you finish using them, you exit. They're these platforms. So AWS is also a platform, it serves the sites, you go to it, you come back. And then even Ethereum and EOS and every other blockchain service out there, they're all still platforms. They're really no different. When you use an Ethereum dApp or an EOS dApp or any other dApp, you use it and then you exit. Or if you do a trade, you use it and you exit. It's a platform that exists. Whereas Holochain is a pattern, it's a framework. So it's more of like a grammar and a language. It's a way of building apps, distributed apps. And so another big thing to understand is that with blockchain, you tend to have one big global ledger. So Bitcoin and Ethereum, there's one big global ledger, and just like every other platform, you access it, you use it, and you exit. On Holochain, there is no one big Holochain. Holochain is a peer-to-peer technology, and it's even more than that. It's kind of like every single app is its own Holochain network. So it's like a fractal holochains. It's holochains within holochains within holochains. And it's really human-centric. So these kind of nodes around these little rings, so I'll talk about these things later, these are called DHTs. They're humans, so the humans are the ones that use the apps, and every app is its own kind of private network, and you join it through a membrane. There's lots of like biomimicry type words in this system. And the users kind of bridge between apps. So it's all about like, you run the apps you want to run, and then if nobody wants to run those apps, then the apps don't exist. Whereas with blockchain, it's like one platform, that's it, it always stays there. And so blockchain is, you might have seen these kind of diagrams before. You've got centralized, decentralized, distributed. So blockchain is decentralized in terms of its architecture. So there's no one server running like a database like on Amazon or Google. It's decentralized in the sense that there's a few nodes that help kind of run, the miners that help run and verify the transactions and guess the next block. But at the same time, the data storage, if you think about it that way, is centralized. And also the consensus mechanism is centralized. There is one global consensus mechanism that everyone has to adhere to on Bitcoin or Ethereum, and all the data is in one place. Like, you can pull down the entire the entire blockchain because it's all in one place. Whereas Holochain is distributed. The data is sharded by default. It's spread around, and there's no chokehold, there's no bottleneck anywhere. And so this is interesting because, so can anyone guess what that is on the left? No? It's a quantum computer. I don't know what type. I just literally searched quantum computer in Google Images and just slapped it in. Yeah. There's probably a bunch of copyright issues, but copyright systems are very shit systems, so whatever. So quantum computers and blockchain, they don't go together. So if we're transhumanists and we think that quantum computing is likely to happen in our lifetimes, then that means that anything you've ever stored on the blockchain is going to be public to everyone at some point in the future. So storing health records on the blockchain, even if you encrypt them, is a really bad idea. Storing any type of data you don't want to be public on the blockchain, regardless of whether it's encrypted, is a really bad idea, because the moment quantum computing becomes available, you just suck down all that data, because data on the blockchain is centralized, it's all in one place. And you can then just do whatever you want with that. So in Holochain, because you have this kind of idea of like private but bridged networks, what you could do is you could store your personal data on your own devices and kind of shard it around as like a backup. So, most people have a laptop, maybe a desktop, a phone, a tablet. So what you do is you say, okay, I'll add them all to my own personal trusted network, and I'll store all my data on there and keep redundant copies. So if one of them fails, I've still got all my data. And then you might have a second layer where you're like, okay, I trust I trust my family to also keep a record of my data if my devices ever get lost or stolen or whatever. And then you can have more layers. You'd be like, okay, I trust this friend network to keep a record. And in the advent of quantum computing, yes, all the data is still going to be obviously cracked, but at least then it's not available publicly globally. Your data is still with yourself and your trusted network of friends. And that's the big thing on Holochain as well, is that all your data is actually, it's owned by you, it's stored by you, it's not stored on the blockchain. You kind of run these apps locally, and the app, by being part of the app, you actually share the network, the data in between that network. So here's an interesting question. Where is the English language stored? So is it stored in a dictionary? Well, no, because if it was stored in a dictionary, we have to confer a dictionary for every single word every time we want to speak with each other. The English language is stored in ourselves, but also collectively. So there's, all of us each know a little bit of the language, but then collectively we kind of share this distributed, data sharded, thing that we call the English language. And that's exactly how Holochain works compared to blockchain. So again, blockchain is all the data stored in one place essentially. You access it like a platform. In Holochain, data is stored first of all with local hash chains. So this whole system still has the same functionalities and the same, almost as like the same goals as blockchain. It's still immutable data that you can't change. It's still using a thing called hash chains, which is a record after record kind of hashed together in a sequence where if you go back and you break one of the previous, like if you go back and try to edit a previous record, you break all the other hashes, and so it's, you can very quickly say that you tampered with your own record. And so that's kind of useful. Like, this is why blockchains are, this whole hashing concept is really useful, because if you can actually have a system where individual users can actually keep a record of their own data, and they can actually show proof that they haven't tampered with that data, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
What's hashing?
Hashing is it's like a, how to explain it? It's like a one-way function, usually using prime numbers. It kind of it kind of links, it hashes the data into a single kind of string. I think it's usually like a certain length. So you can basically take any type of data, like you could take the entire encyclopedia, you could hash all of that, and it will return a unique string that's always the same size.
It's like putting a fingerprint on a file.
Yeah, fingerprint typing, yeah. And so that's really cool.
In the terms of a chain, you take the fingerprint off one, you snapshot that and add that to the next file, and then that's got a unique fingerprint, so if you change that one there, that fingerprint there would be different. Yeah.
And then like
the actual sort of stack.
Yeah, the combination of the fingerprints is important as well. So that's how you can see if it's been broken at any time, because all of the fingerprints combined make a fingerprint. And if you change any one of the fingerprints, it changes the name all the time.
And that's what Bitcoin does. Bitcoin just stacks on the prints and adds it to a chain. That's why it's called blockchain. Because the one print, then the next block, and then if you change one, you change all of them. Or you've changed all the blocks after that. If you try and change the previous block, you'll change the next print.
Sounds like my phone screen.
Yeah, like feel free to ask any questions throughout this. I'm just going to keep raising.
It's a wrap.
If there's any of these, yeah. So distributed hash tables aren't some new concept. If anyone's ever used BitTorrent, I use that all the time because like who would use Netflix and HBO and all these other services? Like when you got to pay so much, just torrent it. It's easy. Look it up. The technology behind BitTorrent is the exact same thing they use for distributed hash table. So distributed hash table is like, it's still like having a database, like it's still like having data, but it's stored kind of shared amongst everyone. So it's not like it sits anywhere. It's like you have a piece of the data, you have a piece of the data, and when I want to request the data, it kind of goes out and gossips in the network and then returns what you need. And the cool thing about this is that you don't have a lot of scaling issues because the data is sharded. And I'll get into that, I think, in some other slides. So this is the other big thing as well. Like, so you think of like BitTorrent and Bitcoin and Ethereum. Their whole model is based around this kind of global centralized consensus. And again, like I told you, I was being antagonistic. Like, one of the key words that blockchain loves is decentralization, and I'm just trying to say, well, no, it's centralized. There's parts of it that are very centralized. So consensus is this idea that basically everyone has to agree that something happens, and so that's what really all these systems are all about. The Bitcoin blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain is really about trying to create a global state machine so that you have this time sequential series of events that happened that says this happened at this point and everyone agrees with it. But for that to happen, you have to have this big central record of everything that's ever happened, and that grows into a huge change, becomes hard to manage. Whereas peer-to-peer, which is what Holochain is all about like, okay, let's just kind of come to a consensus over time gradually, rather than like trying to have everything stamped in concrete at the same time. Let's just like have a circle discussion and kind of get to the consensus, the truth of it. And so again, it's very much like you look at like Ethereum, and the way it's kind of developed is that by default you have to just, if you want to build on Ethereum, you have to use the consensus mechanism. It's just like the core developers have built it in, and you have to pay the gas cost, the Ethereum cost, because it's just built in. So it's like top down, and then their scaling mechanism is trying to like take what's already there, which is already inefficient and terrible, and trying to push it down out further to the fringes, like to eventually that everyone should be running their own blockchain. Whereas Holochain just goes, okay, well let's invert that process, and let's like have every single person essentially have their own hash chain, their own blockchain, and then they join the networks they want to do, and this consensus kind of emerges bottom up, much more like nature. So yeah, again, like scaling issues. So Ethereum, when I got into it, and when it was really interesting, was it was pitching itself as the world computer. The idea that like, wouldn't it be cool if you turn the entire internet into a single computer that everyone can kind of process on and use in this kind of one like awesome system. And then that quickly kind of just didn't happen because they ran into scaling issues, because the architecture by nature is very like poor. It doesn't scale because it centralizes all in this one place. So now you've got, if you follow like the scaling solutions, you get all these things like plasma sharding. They're trying to go proof of stake, state channels, and really what they're trying to do is that everyone has these kind of side chains where you might have a business or an organization where you run something else aside, and you have your own little private blockchain, but then you package it all up into a single like state, and then you store that onto the global public blockchain. So it's very like, it's still fractal, but it's kind of trying to go from the top down rather than the bottom up. Whereas because Holochain is distributed from the beginning, and it's agent centric or human centric rather than data centric. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so like when you're using the analogy of like BitTorrent as like
yep.
when explain how yeah, I was always wondering like how to like remove that data or like get rid of that data that you have, like for example on like BitTorrent or anything like that. I mean, how does that work exactly? Because I've heard like you can't really remove that data from the local server or wherever it is.
Yeah.
So like, is it possible to kind of remove that data, or how does that work?
Like with BitTorrent you can, because it's not really like immutable, meaning it's not like a static kind of record of what happened. But with anything like blockchain and even in Holochain, the data always stays there, because if you go back and delete the data, it's tampering with what was there.
That's what creates a different hash.
Yeah.
And then if it's added to the next hash, it changes.
So that's always been a big issue, is blockchain in particular, because people have obviously just for fun, for giggles, have uploaded child porn to the blockchain, and it's like that's always going to be there. You can't stop that. That's always going to be there. And the same thing with Holochain. You can anything you add to your own chain or to the DHT because it records it in this hash chain model. If you go back and change anything, then you've tampered the whole chain, and you've broken it. So the way they do it, they allow updates, but they kind of just say, okay, that data isn't is the updated version anymore, and it links to this new piece. So yeah, there is that issue of data always exists. So IPFS and BitTorrent are kind of similar models in this kind of peer-to-peer distributed thing. Another one that's is really cool is called Scuttlebutt. So mining is a big thing in blockchain. You've probably heard about this. So they're basically they're churning all this computational power in this system called proof of work, where they're basically trying to guess the next hash, the next block. And it does secure the network because it takes a lot of computing power to go back and break the hash, the chains of blocks. But as a result, you get this massive centralization in hardware requirements. So in the early days when I was mining Bitcoin on just a regular laptop, regular desktop on a really crappy graphics card, we were getting 1 Bitcoin per day because the difficulty factor was quite low. But if you try to do it these days, you just can't. You need a cluster of GPUs. This is why China is kind of going crazy with this, because they've got cheap access to hydropower and they just do these massive server farms, GPU farms. But then you've got massive centralization. So mining on your own, even actually when I was mining on your own, it takes a long time. What you do is you join a pool where everyone kind of collectively joins together and mines together, so they've got a better chance of solving the next block. So if you solve the next block, you get the reward, the Bitcoin or the Ethereum. But so the 4 mining pools in Ethereum control 75% of the hash rate. So essentially 4 groups have major control of the blockchain. And so they could do what's called a 51% attack and just completely take over the blockchain. And the same thing with Bitcoin. 5 mining pools control 70% of Bitcoin. In Holochain, there's no mining, so it's not even an issue.
It basically means they can change reality, what the truth is on the blockchain.
And change history.
Yeah.
Well, true. If you can point enough hashing power at the blockchain, you can change the history. Right. And then you can change the chain, and then everybody else can agree that you've solved the block. And you put them all together.
Yep.
Are there economic incentives in the form of tokens to incentivize adding to the network?
In Holochain, yeah, so I'll get to that. So there's no core token in Holochain because there's no mining. So there is a separate project called Holo, which I'll get to, which does have a token, which is all about hosting but not mining.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So this another reason why Holochain is really cool, because it doesn't have a core token, so there's no cost to it, which I'll get into a bit later.
They also believe that the cost is so low that you're incentivized to use it just because of the actual what you get out of using the application. So you may as well run it, and it doesn't really do much to your computer. So, whereas mining is super expensive.
Nathan, could you briefly go into what is mining and also why mining is not required for Holochain?
Yep, so I don't know how to explain this well. So mining is basically you're running a hell of a lot of compute power at essentially trying to guess the next hash that fits in this chain of hashes. And I think you're basically trying to guess the zeros in front of it.
Yeah, leading zeros.
Leading zeros,
It's
yeah.
you look, because you basically, when you mine, you produce random strings of letters and numbers, and then occasionally you get one that has 0, 0, 0, 0, and then X, 5, 2, blah, 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 blah. And so when it starts off with a number of zeros at the start, you go down the next block.
I think people might get lost.
Yeah.
A block consists of a series of transactions. So pretend it's just a spreadsheet. And everybody here sent money to each other or something, and then you've just got that record. In Bitcoin, you need to create a hash for that block, which is the fingerprint to say, this is the state of that document right now. And in Bitcoin, you've got to create a hash that has a certain amount of zeros leading before the actual print with the random numbers.
I think, yeah,
And
to
the mining-
simplify it, it's like, it's just a way to randomly make someone the authority to declare what's written onto the next line in the ledger.
Yeah.
It's like a randomization protocol.
But the people are probably curious to why it takes so much electricity. And the game theory is there are people that are trying to get that block reward by creating the hash for that block, because then they put that block onto the blockchain. And when whoever puts that block onto the blockchain by solving the hash problem, they get the Bitcoin reward. And then everybody else competes for the next spreadsheet hash. So they can put that on the next part of the chain. And that's how they get the rewards.
This is what makes blockchain meetups really exciting. I'm telling you guys. We'll get you to do a presentation on the technical aspects of Bitcoin blockchains.
Yeah. Oh, and that's why it costs so much electricity, because people are trying to compete against each other to get that block first, to create the hash first.
And then in Holochain there's no mining.
We're not mining.
Yeah. In Holochain there's hosting but not mining. So you if you want to run an app, you run it and you kind of help collectively host that data. And so it's kind of this more pure form. It doesn't involve game theory and financial games and all this other crap. And then there's another interesting slide that my former employer probably won't like. So the Ethereum blockchain is also now 3 terabytes in size as of today. So if you want to download the full archival node, it's 3 terabytes. So it's this thing that just keeps growing. It'll never stop growing. And EOS is 4 terabytes as well. And if you actually look at so these are 2 consensus companies. One's called Infura, one's called MetaMask, and I'll talk about MetaMask later. But on the Ethereum blockchain, they actually Infura handles 13 billion daily requests with Infura. Infura is kind of like because you don't want to have to run a full node and download this 3 terabytes to actually engage with the blockchain to kind of deploy your code. So you kind of outsource to something like Infura. But because of this, MetaMask uses Infura, and these 2 things more or less power nearly all the dApps on Ethereum. So CryptoKitties, every possible dApp you can think of, they basically use these 2 services. Infura is hosted on Amazon AWS, so it's centralized, and 50% of them are owned by one guy who used to work for Goldman Sachs. Whereas Holochain has no global ledger, there's no global consensus, and the data is sharded. So less centralized. So then there's this thing as well, this is the status quo. So blockchain is more or less it's kind of like perpetuating hyper-capitalism. It's just let's just go further down this stupid rabbit hole of just disconnection from nature and just into this realm of let's just create these financial instruments that just destroy the earth. So you probably can't read this, but they're really excited about what they've done recently. So they've got this thing called ETH, and then Wrapped ETH, and then MakerDAO, and then there's DAI, and then you've got another thing called CDAI on top of that, which is a pooled DAI, and then you've got RDAI, which is about investing on top of that to earn interest to external parties, and then you've got another thing called LSDAI, which allows you to create derivatives to bet on the future returns of that interest. So they're basically generating this giant derivatives market on Ethereum now. And the derivative market globally is 1.5 quadrillion. It's 15 times the world GDP. It's just this make-believe thing disconnected from reality. It's so stupid. But you look at the developers, the Ethereum developers, people building this, they're gleefully building this shit. It's just guys, come on, stop and think about what you're doing. Whereas Holochain, Holochain actually comes out of a project called Scepter, which was in development before Bitcoin was even released. So Scepter is all about way more expansive things. Let's look at the system and try and change it. So it's all about cooperative framework for distributed applications, quantum leap and large-scale collective social intelligence, peer-to-peer platform for building new commons, pluggable protocols that let everything talk to everything. That's kind of what they're really trying to do, grammatical computing. What if you redesigned our entire computing architecture to mimic nature, where nature can kind of communicate with each other, and it's all mutualism and and think of grammar. You can all understand me right now because I'm speaking English, and we've all got this rule set of English. We haven't had to write up this shitty little API connector so that when I send you the data, cat, you have to go, okay, process cat, and remap it into this other array, and then
we didn't have to be programmed in advance to speak English.
Yeah.
We just learned it.
So they've got really cool projects in this Scepter, Metacurrency, and Commons engine. I probably need to go faster. The other thing too, like blockchain is just anti-physics. Like, so Einstein, a long time ago, proved that time is relative and data is relative. The blockchain assumes that time is absolute and that data is absolute. Because everything is time sequenced, there's a set order, and data, once it's on the blockchain, it confirms that's kind of the truth. You can't change it after the fact. Whereas Holochain is like, okay, well, no, we're agent-centric rather than data-centric. Time is relative because we know this, so things can be concurrent and kind of async and gradual. And nature is all about like, mutualism and kind of coming to consensus gradually over time rather than just forcing it. This is another one that'll piss off blockchain people. So you might hear the word fiat, like blockchain people always talk about like how we're against fiats, and fiat's like kind of the traditional Australian dollars, US dollars. But if you actually look at the definition of fiat, it's a Greek word which means to speak into being. And if you look at what Ethereum and Bitcoin actually do, they essentially speak coins into being. Sure, you do this redundant computing work to prove the authority that you get to speak the coins into being, but you're still inventing it from nothing. There's no backing to it. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are fiat by definition, which will piss off all the crypto people. Whereas, so the other thing as well, like in blockchain, like tokens kind of make sense because you need to keep track of like where all the tokens are and who owns them. So the 21 million Bitcoins, you need to know exactly every single transaction that's ever happened in its history to know where they are and who owns them. With peer-to-peer systems, because there's no global centralized ledger which slows it down, you can still build tokens, but everything would have to map back to that one location, which is silly. So a better model is actually mutual credit. And mutual credit is really interesting. Mutual credit is, it was more or less like the first form of accounting. If you go read David Graeber's book, The First 5,000 Years of Debt, the way money actually works is we first had a form of credit, then we had money, and then we had barter. So we tend to think it was the other way around, that we had barter and then money and then credit. So this is actually the other way. Yeah. And mutual credit is really interesting because it means that you and I can transact and we don't have to let anyone else know about that. And we can still make the transaction, we can still both verify what's happened, and it's this double entry form of accounting where if I send you $100, you go plus 100, I go minus 100, but you're also able to go into negative balances, which is really interesting. So it allows people who don't have money to kind of get instant credit, which is kind of cool. Massive rabbit hole, and you probably won't click until you like go down quite a lot. Another big thing, blockchain has more wealth inequality than North Korea. If you go Google Gini coefficient, which is like the measure of wealth inequality in a system. You can read the headlines there. Like all of crypto is basically owned by a handful of people. Holochain is all about like how do we create deep wealth? Like how do we go beyond that? Then you've got all the memes. The blockchain memes are very primitive. Then you've got the people, and you've got a lot of con men, VCs. This guy just lost 50% of his bitcoins for a court order. These guys, just douchebags there. And these guys are the people that are, some of the core people behind Holochain, and they're typically like techno hippies. They're all about regenerative systems, complex living systems.
Can we just draw some attention to that guy in the top left middle for a second? He claims that he invented Bitcoin, just nobody knows who really invented it. And he just went through a court case where he was one of the OGs of the Bitcoin space. He used to mine it with another guy. And then that guy died, and he wrote some letters to this guy's family and sort of ripped them off of all this guy's Bitcoin. They might have had a million Bitcoins together. And he essentially just stole them by defrauding his family, this guy's family, and he just lost his court case.
Is he on the left side of the dark side?
He's everything more is the dark side.
Like 2 billion or Bitcoin or something has to pay back to them.
It's about accounted to about $5 billion or something.
Yeah.
With Bitcoins that he's got to involve it.
Who controls, in Holochain, who controls how it works? Because there'd be a degree of centralization there if there's like a committee or something, right?
No one. Like there's a core developer team, like any project, but no one controls it.
But
Like,
the
The
core development
Holochain's
team
more
would go about.
like a lantern, sorry.
I was just going to say the core development team would be implementing things based on what they would like to be developed, right? So who, like,
Yeah.
that's a form of
And-
central.
Yeah, and that can be sent to like Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
open source, yeah.
of course. I'm just like,
So it's fully open source.
Yeah.
So like anyone can grab it and
run
do
create
anything
your
with
own
it.
chain, do whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would that be able to interface with all the others?
Yeah, if you want to.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other cool thing I really like about Holochain as well, like there's no core token. There's another project that's kind of symbiotic with it that has a token. But so Holochain has no core token, so it's hard to, you can't shill it. Like, you know, nobody can own anything in it. Like, I don't work for any of these companies. Like, I'm basically unemployed, so I'm not shilling anything. I have no more than like 5-10 grand crypto in anything. Never really have. So Holochain is really cool as well. Like when they actually went to get seed investment, they tried to find seed investors who would give them the money for zero equity. So they gave away no equity whatsoever. And they've also structured it, I'm pretty sure it's structured in such a way where, so Holo, which I'll explain later, is like a for-profit thing, or kind of for-profit, it generates revenue. Holochain doesn't generate revenue, but Holochain owns Holo. So the open source free thing is that kind of owns this revenue generating thing to kind of help it sustain itself. And yeah, when they did their ICO for the other one, they didn't give away discount tokens, they didn't do pre-sales like all these other scammy ICOs. Like, they really tried to make it a proper thing.
Just to follow up, like they are looking at a transition model for actually helping like the whole community actually control the updates so that everyone can contribute to like upgrading it and sort of forking it and stuff. So they don't actually want to be like the main developers of
The way Linux
What have
works.
been version was
Yep.
it on?
It's open source, it's fully open source. Yeah, so I'll try to go faster. So blockchain is all about trustless systems, like let's not trust anyone, let's just trust code, which is a bit of an oxymoron. Like you gotta trust a trustless system. Holochain's all about like actually trusting, like building trusted relationships, building commons, building communities. Because if everything collapses, do you want a system that relies on trust, like no trust? Or do you want a system that's like all about collaborative ecosystems and community and relationships where we can help each other get through the dystopia that's coming? Ethereum things are called smart contracts. These are kind of the rule sets, the things you code and build and deploy to the blockchain. On Holochain, they take a biomimicry type approach for everything they name. So they call theirs DNA, because you're kind of like building an organism which is comprised of multi-cells people, and you code up a DNA that designs the rule sets. And this is where they actually have their kind of localized consensus in some sense, because what they do is they take all the DNA and they hash it up into a single hash. And if someone else joins this network and they see that they're running a different DNA, then they're a different organism. And so we don't let them verify like when they send something onto that network, we don't kind of verify it.
It's really
So cool. It's a cool rabbit hole. You may have heard of this as well. On the left, you've got DAOs, so decentralized autonomous organizations. This is a big concept in blockchain. In Holochain, really bad acronym, SAC. SACs, Sovereign Accountable Commons. This is another rabbit hole. So DAOs tend to typically be all about like one token equals one vote, because you basically, you want to, blockchain's all about anonymity and trustlessness, and so you have this issue called Sybil attacks, which is the idea of like, well, I can just spin up 1,000. If I have full anonymity, I can just spin up 1,000 accounts, and then I can like vote 1,000 times. And so the way they tend to get around that, the lazy way, is they just go, okay, well, here's this autonomous organization, there's no kind of hierarchy, we have this rule set, and everyone gets to vote, but the way we vote is like, if you have one token, that's one vote. And so yeah, cool, all the rich people get the most power, that's great. In Sovereign Accountable Commons, because Holochains doesn't like the idea of anonymity, because in real life we're not anonymous, we kind of know each other, it's about trusted networks. So they kind of bypass that Sybil issue, and you can have one person equals one vote. And it's all about like, kind of growing a commons together that can contribute to everyone's well-being. It's kind of cool, and it's sovereign as well. So with DAOs, like when you deploy the code, it always exists, and it's running. Think AI paperclip maximizers. This is what DAOs are. they are fucking dangerous to the world. And sovereign accountable commons are, you run it if you want to run it. If you don't like it, don't run it. Don't be part of it. These tend to be the things. So blockchain is all about libertarianism. It's commodity-based, crypto tokens, competitive games, oligarchic consensus, market value. It's extractive, it's profit-driven. Holochain is about commons, mutual credit, asset-backed, cooperative games, distributed proof, value sovereignty, generative ecosystems, and purpose-driven. So yeah, game theory. So blockchain is all about like games, financial games, profit. Basically zero-sum games. Like there's winners, there's losers. I mean, every time someone makes a shitload of money in crypto and they sell it, they're basically like what happens when they sell it is some schmuck who came later is buying it off them for a higher price. So you've always got losers all the way along. If I buy a Bitcoin for $1 and I sell it for 10,000, it means some morons bought it off me for $10,000. The next week it drops. That person's lost. I'm happy. So it's all about zero-sum games. If you ever read Finite and Infinite Games, blockchain's a finite game. There's an endpoint to it. Holochain's all about like mutualism. Living sustainably with infinite games that always can be kept playing and in symbiotic, in symbiosis with nature and each other. So it's meant to be like bacteria, like gut bacteria.
Abundance and win-win.
Yeah. And then another big thing, so tokenization, you might have heard about this. So again, because it's a scarcity factor, zero-sum games, it's all about tokenize everything. Like let's just turn everything into a token. And this is again like just a dumb, just like unself-aware thought process. My perfect one is that there's all these people who want to tokenize real estate, which kind of makes sense in their little world. Like, what if you could buy houses are expensive? Yeah. What if you could buy houses for $1? If everyone could invest in real estate for $1, that'd be great. And it's like, well, yeah, but anytime you open up a marketplace like that and you essentially deregulate it and it can't be touched by the government, then you're just going to force prices up. If we tokenize real estate, suddenly houses don't become $1 million median price, they become $4 million median price. And cool, we can all have our dollar invested in these houses that nobody can afford to live in. Great. It's just dumb. It's so bad. And so Holochain's all about like, okay, let's use currencies, cryptocurrencies, as a way to kind of see flows in complex living systems. Because we're individuals in these complex mega-organisms we call society and the internet and the economy, we don't have the capacity to see what's actually happening. And so if we can use currencies as a way to kind of, almost like an accounting more than a transaction type model, we can actually see how things flow and where things are going healthy and where things are going poorly, and then actually step back and assess it from a higher perspective and be able to change the flows in certain ways. So Arthur Brock, who's one of the co-founders of Holochain and Metacurrency, is big into this idea of like talking about currencies as currencies, like seeing the currents, the flows in the systems. Kind of cool. Yeah.
Sorry, again, I don't know how you can see things from the top down and see how flows are going across the entire network when everything's sharded and all that information is actually, isolated in some instances. Like how is there this net, how can we get this net view?
Well, I guess that's something they're kind of trying to solve. Is like, so you have, even though they're kind of private networks, you still have the individuals can breach them. So for example, like, App A is like its own private Holochain network and everyone's operating within that with its own rule sets, and App B is its own system. But if one user runs both App A and App B on their own system, they're now the bridge between it. And so you can have systems where, like, imagine you could query these complex networked systems and just kind of like tease out what you need to. So I don't know how they're going to go about it yet, but that's they're thinking about that.
You can query them, but it's like you don't do it all the time. It's like you could have
Once a month, you just see how things have changed.
Yeah,
and like,
yeah,
that's good to know.
yeah,
Cool.
but it's really like they are trying to help people like they want, because nature responds to local conditions, right? So like a cell isn't trying to understand like how the whole world's working, it's sort of responding to its local context. So you can account for things in its local context, it can make good decisions in its local context, and that's what really matters. Right?
Yeah.
But you can look at things from the top down if you want to, but it's not scalable, it's not fast to do that. But we can do it.
Am I good for time? Do I need to go fast or slow? Okay. I feel like
When you got drinks after it, that's it.
okay, cool. Okay, I'll slow down a bit. Again, like Scarcity. So if you go look up what are the top 10 apps on Ethereum, these guys are in the top 10. So CryptoKitties, you might have heard of that. If you haven't, good for you. So CryptoKitties is basically this. It's really cool. Like what they've built is really cool. Like I mean, there are really cool stuff on blockchain. It's just like in a certain paradigm that's just bad. So CryptoKitties is really cool. It's like you have they're crypto collectibles. So you can actually have like they're kind of like non-fungible or fungible. I never forget always forget which word that is. Non-fungible. So you can't. You basically you buy it and it's like it exists and nobody can change it. And it's its own separate entity, even though it's this digital item. And what they've got is this kind of like evolutionary algorithm, so that when you can actually breed cats with each other. So you can not only buy and sell cats, these digital crypto collectibles, but you can actually breed them together, and their whole designs will change, which is really cool. But again, it's just like there was a CryptoKitty that sold for $100,000 at a conference I was at one time. I was like, yeah, cool, but why? And then these other two are betting platforms, so obviously gambling's a massive thing, and then also decentralized exchanges. But the big problem with this is that, and the reason why this happens, the scarcity factor, is the tech stack. When you look at the tech stack of blockchain, at the very bottom, there's always a cost, because they've got that consensus mechanism, the mining, and miners only, because it's all based on game theory, and miners will only mine because they make money, because it takes a lot of electricity and a cost for them. So therefore, you have to have a cost for every single thing you do on a blockchain, typically. And so what that means is every single thing you do has a fee to it. So it's a bit like, well, when's the last time you paid your HTML fee or your HTTP fee? Like, these things don't exist on the real internet. Whereas Ethereum and Bitcoin are trying to like build this new internet, but with a cost at the bottom. And so the only things that are being built are these things that have some financial aspect to them, because you've got to cover that base level cost. On Holochain, so these are some of the projects. So you've got Junto, Junto is like a social media platform that's trying to like make it much more less gamified. HoloREA is like, you need to go down that rabbit hole. It's really cool, like peer-to-peer accounting, resource-event agent accounting, which is just opens up accounting, so it's not only silos in these companies. Omni, which is what Marcus is actually working on, which is a publishing platform for science, and a bit more than that, even a sense-making platform. You've got RedGrid, which is trying to do kind of ecosystems of energy grids, a bit like what PowerLedge is doing, but less extractive again. And you've got, what's this one? Producers Market, which is all about commons cooperatives for foods. You've got Commons Engine, which is again about building commons. They're trying to do regenerative agriculture. You've got Hum, which is another publishing platform like Junto. They're trying to help people share stories. My project Peerism, which is about trying to, long story, but like basically trying to get people out of jobs, free people from the slavery that is jobs. And then Beehive, which is a cooperative down in Bendigo, which is trying to create a local sharing economy in Bendigo just for its own people. And so, and these are like the core apps that are being built on Holo right now. So you can already see there's a massive difference in the culture of what's being built, primarily because of the lack of fees. So right now it costs you, for every time you do something on Ethereum, it costs you 2.5 cents every time something happens, and it'll take 2 minutes to occur. But this price fluctuates. Like, I remember at one point it used to be like $1. So actually, I think it was last year. So I built a token for the Singularity University Summit last year. And I think it cost me like $700 in transaction fees to make. because of the Ethereum gas cost, they call it, the cost to actually make these things happen, to pay the miners, was really expensive, so it fluctuates. With Holo, which it's a hosting thing, which I'll explain later, I guess. With Holochain, it's all about hosting your own apps and running it, so there is really no fee. But if you want to help host these things and kind of be more accessible in a more user-friendly way, there's a thing called Holo, which is 100,000 to 1 million times cheaper than Ethereum. So blockchain is all about rent seeking and private ownership. Landlords. Lucky landlords. Whereas Holochain is all about generative commons ownership. So I don't know, if people haven't heard of what the commons is, like the commons is really about like, how do you explain it? It's like everyone kind of collectively owns it, but nobody owns it. And it's about something that kind of, helps people. So it goes back to the original days of like, you have a field of a forest or something, and everyone kind of like collectively has benefit of. But if if it's unmanaged, the typical tragedy of the commons, which is basically just an unmanaged commons, then someone could go in and cut down all the trees. But building commons where there are actually these kind of generative, sustainable things where, imagine in the future, rather than joining a company and working for a company on some shitty project building widgets to extract value and destroy the earth for profit, to help your masters get more wealthy and buy more yachts. Instead, you could join a commons where you all collectively own it, and collectively but also not own it. It's almost like beyond a cooperative where it's like, it's just there but nobody owns it. And we all kind of help build it, and we all get value from that. That helps us live, our lives and pay for our living costs. And yeah.
Whereas I ask you something on that.
Yep.
Just touching on that, and you mentioned earlier with the
Microphone.
you mentioned earlier with the commons when people want to vote.
Yep.
So, do you basically use your ID to get a token to vote with? How's that going to affect people in the third world or in countries where they got mad currency devaluations going on? Is that going to still work as well for them as it is us? Or?
So like obviously all this tech relies, like you need a device, you need the internet, you can't really do anything beyond that. But so one of the interesting things with the way...
Do you need a passport?
So they're working on a system called personas. So I don't know how that's going to play out yet, they haven't really released that. Hopefully it's more easy than the current user experience of having to manage private keys and stuff with blockchain. But a really cool thing with Holochain is that you don't have to always be connected to the internet, so it can split. So this is the example of like, you could run a distributed Twitter using Holochain, and you could have say 300 million users, and you could have a model where, imagine Australia, all our internet gets cut off from the rest of the world. Then what would happen in that system, in a Holochain-based model, is the Australian Twitter would still work, everyone would still be tweeting and sharing the data, and then once the internet gets reconnected, it would just automatically heal and come back together. Whereas with blockchain, you kind of always have to be connected to the internet to make it happen.
I think, so just to get on your point about the voting system, so that's just one example of the voting system you can do, or that governance system, which is a different system you can have.
Yeah.
Like a token vote system is like a very basic level of the governance system you see in this world, where you can have like very crazy, complicated systems that allow you to sort of part of the actual decision-making process is like sense-making, so that people are sort of coming on the same page about things or opening up sort of understanding rather than just going, oh, what's your opinion on this? I want this to happen, hard to explain, but it's a very open field in terms of like possibilities for governance and
you don't have to use tokens for because there's no consensus, there's no cost to the bottom, like the stack, so you can build whatever you want on top of it. Like that's where you can actually build like models of abundance where it's just like just do cool stuff where it's not about like financial transactions and stuff like that.
But if you want to learn more, that's what Commons Engine are working on. So they're helping people, like the communities, develop their own sort of governance mechanisms or whatever they want for the given context.
So I think I've got like 2 slides left, so almost there. So this is kind of an interesting look at the user experience of blockchain versus Holochain. So on blockchain, there are like certain browsers you can download. One's called Mist, and there's a lot of like new apps that are coming out that kind of make this process easier. But the way you typically use Adapt is a decentralized app. So the way you typically use something like CryptoKitties is you go through this list. So you open up a web browser. This is for the first time. You have to then know how to do this to start with. You go to the Chrome or Firefox store. You search for MetaMask. You then install the correct MetaMask because there's a lot of scam MetaMasks. They'll try and take your money, so you got to know that. You create an account. Then you've got to save your seed phrase. You then need knowledge on how to do back up your private keys effectively. Then you need to go to an exchange, like a crypto exchange, to transfer your Australian dollars in. And so there's a lot of them now where you just like, you can do BPay into it and stuff like that, which is really cool. But then you got to wait for 3 days for that to actually go through. Then you got to go back to the exchange. Then you got to convert your Australian dollars into Ethereum, ETH. Then you got to wait for the transaction time, which could be a couple of minutes. Then you got to send the Ethereum to your MetaMask wallet that you've created. Then you got to wait for the transaction to process. Then you finally go to CryptoKitties.com or whatever. But then every single time you do something, like you want to post a comment or like something or anything that involves like posting some action, like reading it's free, it's just like pulls it down. But if you want to post, it always costs money. So it's going to cost you, 3 cents at the moment, potentially 20 cents, potentially a couple of dollars. And then when you do that, MetaMask pops up and it says, do you want to confirm this transaction? And then usually they set the gas, so gas fee is like how much you pay for that, or how much you're willing to pay for that to go through. And if you put in a higher gas fee, then the miners will pick it up quicker and process it faster.
It's to incentivize miners to put you at the front of the queue.
Yeah.
To put your transaction in the block before anyone else.
But often MetaMask will set the default gas fee at too high a price. Because again, all this money is going to Ethereum, which goes back to consensus, who makes shitloads of money, and owned by a billionaire who used to work for Goldman Sachs. Screw that guy. So then you adjust the gas fee, and then you confirm the transaction, and then you gotta wait again for the transaction to confirm, and then finally, you've liked that post. And then if you ever run out of funds in your MetaMask wallet, you've got to repeat step 7 again, all the way down. So this is where Holo is really interesting, and this is where it's super confusing. The naming is really dumb. There's Holochain and there's Holo. So Holochain is the pattern, it's the framework, it's free, it's open source, there's no token involved. That's the thing that people build the apps with. Holo is a symbiotic app. It's kind of like going to be the first Holochain built app, and it's basically like a hosting platform. Because they want to solve that problem on the left. They wanted to make it easy, adoption is a big thing, user experience. So what they actually do is they've done an Indiegogo campaign where they're selling these like little boxes you just plug in, and that kind of, you then become part of this hosting network where you help host and serve these apps. But eventually they're going to allow you to basically run this on your own computer, you don't have to use this device. But it kind of acts, it is centralized, but it's like it's a middleman bridge centralization system to kind of just make it easy for people who don't know or don't want to have to work out how to install Holochain and run Holochain apps locally. They can just open up the web browser, hopefully not CryptoKitties, go to OmniApp or Holo REA or Peerism or any of these cool new Holochain distributed apps that are being built, and it loads up like a regular website. They won't even know it's a Holochain app. They register, create an account, log in, and they use the app for free. Quite literally, people will be using these distributed Holochain apps without even knowing they're using them, because it would be the same as accessing any other website, like Facebook or Twitter or anything you do. And so that's like a huge game changer. They're taking a long time to launch the damn thing. I think it's like 2 years late now or something, but it'll happen soon. They're in closed alpha at the moment, so that'll be really interesting.
Question.
Yeah.
If there is no token, what is the value of whatever?
Yes, so there is a token in Holo. Yeah. So the developers pay the hosts to host their content. So it's optional, you don't have to use, this is the confusing as well, Holo is not required, you don't have to use it, but as a developer, if you want people to be able to do this to access your app, like any other website, then you're probably going to want to use this service. So you'll kind of deploy your app to this host network, which is just distributed hosting with all these people running these boxes, or their own computers, and you'll pay the hosts each time they help serve your app. But the difference here with mining is so mining, every time there's a new node on, every node on the network runs the exact same computation, and so it's if you do something, every miner runs the same thing at the same time. Whereas with hosting, you only pay for what's served. So it's all about pure supply and demand. And it's also hosts also get to set their own price. There's this whole dynamic around the pricing mechanism, but it's all mutual credit, and you got to understand what mutual credit is to know what this means. But basically, yeah, so it'll be super cheap. It'll be again 1,000, 100,000 to 1 million times cheaper, and you only pay for what you're actually, So if you're a developer, you build a cool Holochain app, and you go, I want people to access this really easily, like any other website, and you go, I deploy to this system, and then every time someone accesses the website, I pay a tiny little micro fee. But that micro fee is a mutual credit, where it's this balancing system. So yeah. And I think Holo, the organization, charges a 1% fee to help fund the development of Holochain and Holo, but that's going to change over time. So yeah, it would be interesting too, because they've sold 5,000 of these boxes initially, And when they first launch, there's going to be maybe like 50 apps that want to be hosted on 5,000 boxes. And because Holochain is so efficient, you can run like 100 apps on a Raspberry Pi. So if they have they've sold these chunky, like, 1 terabyte boxes, so they're going to have like ample amount of hosting capacity, and the demand will be down here. And because hosts get to set their own price, the price for hosting will be like, it'll be cheaper to host on Holo initially than it will be on Amazon or Google or anything else. But you have to still build a Holochain app to host it on there though, so it's a bit different here. And then it fluctuates, the whole mutual credit supply fluctuates with demand. It's really cool, brings things up. Yeah.
I have an idea. What if you hosted on the Holo with Google Drive? Would that work? So you found a Google Drive and you just sort of contribute to Holo. So
host your Google Drive content on Holo.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could probably set that up.
Yeah, cool.
I don't know how, but yeah.
No idea how. Interesting.
Just a quick one, related to that, in terms of storage and so on, what are the implications for disaster recovery, backup, all these issues with distributed systems? What are the costs involved, and how do you do that?
Yeah, so the developers get to set their redundancy factor. So you might say, okay, well, I want, for any piece of data, I want, say, 10 people to have a copy of it. And so it's always, on this network, they're always gossiping with each other. And so if one node goes offline, it'll just instantly go, oh shit, we've got 9 copies rather than 10, so it'll create another copy. So it's almost like self-healing system with data sharding. I don't know exactly how it works, but they're using an algorithm that's been around for like decades that does this.
And like if you lose all of your data, like your laptop or whatever, you can log in, or like if you use Holo to get into it, you can just like log in the Holo again and then download all of your stuff back, because people in the network will have copies of that.
Okay, so what about the case of the ransomware attack, for example?
Yeah, well actually, so yeah, that would be useful. So the way I kind of see it working when they finally mature, I think what will happen is, like I mentioned at the start, you'll have all your devices that you own. You'll basically set up your own private network and set a redundancy factor to the number of devices you have, depending on how much storage you can store on them. So like say you have a phone and you have a laptop and you might have an external hard drive and stuff like that. You want to hold on to your own data, because this whole concept's all about like you controlling your data. It's like mutual sovereignty. So you want to basically I want to store all my data in redundant copies across all my devices, so that I know that if one of them gets corrupted or dies or has a ransomware attack, then you've got all the other devices instantly have a redundant copy. And then you go buy a new laptop. If it's so bad, it's destroyed, you just throw it out. Like you go buy a new one, you connect it to the network, you give it permissions, and it will just automatically sync back again. It's kind of cool. And then you can have those tiered layers of trust as well. It's almost like having a Holochain app, because that's kind of what Holochain apps do. Every app is its own network, and the users kind of help collectively run it. They help collectively share the data between each other while hosting and serving their own data. So it's almost like having a Holochain app with just you and just your data. So I think that'll definitely be something someone builds.
Exactly how it works.
Like so life logging. This is where like the rabbit hole of this has been really cool. Like I probably should have mentioned this at the start. Like having gone down this Holochain path, like it completely changes your thinking, because you have to think about things in a very different way. Like with blockchain, it's really no different than just if you were doing any other startup and you're like, okay, well, I've got my front end, my back end, and the data's all there, and I just build the connectors and stuff like that. Whereas with Holochain, it's all about like peer-to-peer systems, and what if you actually build like collective intelligence that can bootstrap on itself, and then you start going down the idea of like I used to be really into life logging. Like in the Singularity days, I built an app that was kind of creepy. It would record audio 24/7 in the background from my phone in my pocket, and then I could transcribe the audio. So I had like 3 years of audio recordings, which is really creepy and cool. So that would, like life logging with this would be really cool. Like if you want to record your entire life and quantify itself and all this other stuff, and you want to keep that data yourself and have an immutable record of it, then that's the perfect use case for this as well.
And because it automatically store it securely as well. So,
yeah.
Hey.
I just wondering, before how you're saying platforms versus patterns, and how Holochain is more of a pattern. Would Holo then be also a platform? Would that be?
It's a distributed platform, because it doesn't exist in one place either, because you have it spread across 5,000 boxes,
Yeah.
that people just have in their room in front of them or whatever.
Yeah, so they're going to be using Cloudflare's DNS service, which is a centralized, kind of semi-centralized system. Because the whole DNS system, the way the internet works, it is all centralized. Like ICANN controls the domain names, and when you type in facebook.com, that then points to a server, a collection of servers, and then it finds the IP address and then points to that server. So for Holochain, for Holo to work, they're using a thing called Cloudflare, which is a massive service, massive company, and you will type in whatever domain name you want, and then that will go through Cloudflare's servers and then point out into this distributed network of people running these hosting boxes.
Is that like how Tor works or something like that though?
Tor's a bit different. Tor's like bouncing the requests around so many times that people can't really
These are just going through
trace it.
one cloud thing and coming out and then
sorry, what was that question?
So how you explained before, it goes into one and then it's redirected.
Yeah. So it'll go through almost like through Cloudflare.
Yeah.
So this is why it's centralized, because it goes through a company's servers and then out into this distributed network.
So, but that's the way most of the internet works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's not
If
weird.
that was
That's
gone,
not
we'd
weird.
all be fucked.
Yeah, because it still takes however many milliseconds for our optic cable to get to the States. So if Facebook, for example, didn't have, they don't use Cloudflare, they have their own servers everywhere, but if Facebook was all located in the States, in one place, it would take us ages to do anything on Facebook. Maybe that's a good thing, but it's just, it wouldn't be working for users, right? So what happens is people like Facebook have their own, but Cloudflare make it possible for any website to have a fake base in lots of places all over the world so that it's quick to get there. So that like I can be on my computer in Sydney and visit a website in India, but it's real quick because they have cache versions of it everywhere.
And so something like, so Holochain's still kind of early days, like still built in Rust. It's usable, but it's not quite, I wouldn't say production ready yet. it's rapidly improving. And so something I'd really love to do is like the ultimate demo would be like, imagine if we cut off the internet in this room and we just said, okay, everyone grab out their phone and you just, someone downloads this, we kind of like have this little mesh network set up. Or maybe we could just use the Wi-Fi but just like disconnect the external internet, and then we could all download an app, like a Holochain app, run it on our own device, and then it could be anything like it could be a chat app, and you could post to it and you could suddenly see like all the communication happening, and we've got then our own little private network. Actually, and something I really want to do with like Peerism, like kind of like bootstrap collective intelligence. Like I love this idea of like, like right now I have no idea, if I look at you in the room, I have no idea what your skills are, what your passions are, what your interests are. It'd be cool if we could just suddenly like quickly bootstrap something where it's like, someone sends out a task request, they're like, I need some help with this JavaScript problem or this gardening problem or whatever, some help or task or whatever they want to do. And it kind of bounces around, gossips out, and some people get the message and they're like, are you good at this? And they're like, no. Like, do you want to refer it to someone else in the room? Like, yes. And as you refer these things to each other and it kind of randomly kind of senses out the network of human people, it would form this kind of network, this almost like neural network comprised of humans, where rather than the nodes being artificial neurons, the nodes are actually humans. And it's a slower neural network, but it's still this like, we've built this little network of collective intelligence, and so the next time someone posts a task out, it just immediately knows where to go. It doesn't have to go through this slow process. So that's kind of like...
Smart Slack?
Yeah, kind of like that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Just, so, it's hard to explain because it's like, you've almost got to go down this peer-to-peer Holochain rabbit hole for a good couple of months. Like when it first took me 2 weeks solid, like every day, 8 hours a day, consuming every piece of content I could find to even like have it click. Like, because when I was in hardcore blockchain land, I was like, yeah, everything's great. And then I was like, all my friends are like, no, blockchain's shit. And I was like, oh, okay. So once you go down this rabbit hole, you start thinking very differently, and you start getting into this kind of realm of like collective intelligence and these kind of common systems. Like it's much more profound. It's really interesting. So I'm gonna go. Oh god, I still got more. So narrow uses. So because of blockchain's shortcomings and the way it's structured and all that game theory, I tend to think there's really only like 4 industries that blockchain is really good for: gambling and speculation and trading, financial, like essentially perpetuating the current financial system. Banks are going to love that. I mean, every single central bank in the world is now doing its own cryptocurrency. Authoritarian governments, like China's social credit system, and the dev tools to support that ecosystem. So developers who are just in a little bubble, coding away, building this dystopia. So the Australian government is unimpressed with blockchain. There's other stories about blockchain for social impact, all these projects that have zero impact. And I've talked about a lot about like what Holochain can do with different kind of commons-based systems and particularly social media networks and stuff like this, more communities and co-ops. The other thing too is that I've been trying to make this argument for a long time, but it's hitting with some people and not with others. Yes, technology can be used for good and evil, but the way the technology is structured, in this case blockchain, it can tend towards a certain scenario, like it can tend towards evil, because it's a global centralized consensus system, it's a global centralized state machine, it's a global centralized data store, and it's all about finance. So you might have heard about Facebook Libra coin, which is backed by all these mega corporations, and like I think if they actually get through the regulatory hurdles they're having right now, like this will become this will probably become our like default currency for everything. Like, because they want to embed it into messaging. You look at like WeChat in the US, and everything's all through WeChat. They basically want this to be the default payment method in Messenger. They have, I think, across Messenger, Instagram, and WhatsApp, which they're merging the technology stack that does the messaging next year into one single thing. They have like three something billion users. So like half the planet will be on the one single messaging protocol owned by Facebook, and the default payment method will be Facebook Libra. You've also got, so China's central bank is issuing a cryptocurrency, like probably next year. JP Morgan has a coin. The IMF has predicted that every central bank is basically going to issue their own cryptocurrency. So if you understand the ideology of blockchain in the beginning, like this is like the opposite of what was supposed to happen. Even though some people want this, some people in the blockchain scene actually want central bank issued crypto, which they're evil. And then obviously, like because blockchain is like a global data store, because you can have private blockchain networks and public blockchain networks. Companies tend to love the private ones. So you're going to have authoritarian states using this technology to track for mass surveillance, because it's a perfect system. And yeah, the rise of the far right. So I tend to think that the blockchain developers are kind of like handmaidens for authoritarianism. Every line of code they write on blockchain and help push that blockchain ecosystem, they're helping push the rise of authoritarianism, because the technology is perfect use case for authoritarian uses. So stew on that for a bit. Whereas Holochain, like these are some of the kind of titles of blog posts and stuff. It's all about peer-to-peer accounting, which is an awesome rabbit hole to go down. It's about commons and regenerative agriculture. It's about mutual credit and social solidarity. It's about mutual sovereignty and sovereign accountable commons. And Scepter's, if you go to scepter.org, which is another rabbit hole, that's their semantic, interoperable, cryptographic, concurrent, responsive networks awakened as living ecosystems. So they're all about like complex living ecosystems, all this kind of deep, profound stuff. I think that's it. So if you, like, I would take a photo of this, or I'll post it somewhere. Like, if you want to, like, because I've been going down, myself and Marcus and others have been going down this rabbit hole for like probably 8 months now, and it's really hard to kind of switch your mindset or like unlearn a lot of the things you've learned in our society. Like, if you follow all those podcasts, Emerge Podcast, Team Human, Rebel Wisdom, and Future Thinkers, and you basically absorb the content in these, and there's also a forum as well, like I think over time, it'll probably take you a couple of months, but it'll click, and you'll think differently, and you'll have like way more profound ideas for projects than what's typically perpetuated in like the startup world and the finance world and these type of things.
Even like a typical social impact world, it's like or saving nature kind of stuff. Like there's some very inspirational ways of thinking about all of those like things we really want to do and save the world. It's like spend some time listening to this stuff. It's super.
I mean, we'll see if it does actually make an impact, but it's different and it's really enlightening. So
are we talking about the difference between blockchain essentially being very hedonistic capitalism and socialism? It's like that's what it sounds like.
It's Holochain is like there's no real idea. It's hard to pin down an ideology in it. Like it's definitely like anti-capitalist, but it's not anything else particular. It's mutualism. Like
it's about what we actually need to do to fix the planet and not die, right? How to that's really it.
Yeah, but if you don't have tokens that are worth something, then like how does it work?
But we can do things without tokens. Like how do you interact with your family and work coherently with each other? You don't.
Sure, but you still say like even if you don't say it's a token, you say X amount of this is worth X amount of that.
It's given,
There's still
value,
a something.
Value back. Asset back.
Right.
Value,
Mutual credit's still that type of monetary transaction.
Right.
But the really interesting thing, if you go down this idea, like the very first podcast, so this is a guy up in Brisbane working on HoloREA, so resource event accounting. Like, if you understand what he's trying to work on, it's the idea of like open accounting systems where if you kind of have these semantically coupled concepts of like, this resource came in and this event happened and these agents were involved, and it can be for any type of economic activity. If you package them and semantically couple them, then and you kind of have them on this distributed public network, then you can have free flow of value go across and through permeate all organizations without having this system work right now where you look at shitty supply chain systems and blockchain is trying to do supply chain just terribly because everyone wants to become the new standard, and so you just have 50 million new standards and competition. Whereas with this model, it's like, okay, well, rather than trying to become this new thing that everyone has to use, it's like, well, why don't we just if we just adopt essentially a pattern, like a semantic pattern, like we do with English, then we can just have these free flows of value occur between organizations without having to have this system where it's like, I will sell you this, and then you write up an invoice and you put it into your accounting system, and then you send the invoice, and then they get the invoice and type it into their accounting system. It's this very siloed model. This is like peer-to-peer open accounting. And the cool kind of conclusion that he's come to after this is that if you can make this happen, you can basically the future of money then doesn't become like crypto or tokens or anything. The future of money just becomes accounting. Like if you can just account for things and just track the flow of anything, that doesn't have to be monetary, it can just be anything, then you don't need money, because money is just the fact that we have shitty accounting systems. If you had a free flow of this happened and this happened and this happened, you could see who's contributing and where the value is flowing, and you can just it's very fluid. I don't know. That's the weird thing. That's not like socialism. That's something different. It's hard to pin down. It's definitely post-capitalism and commons and cooperatives and peer-to-peer and it's definitely that stuff there. So it's cool.
How can the technology be political?
Who's first?
How close it is to commercial use for the company?
The Holochain?
Yeah.
So Holochain, you can build on it now. It's all built in Rust, but they're planning on, you'll be able to build it in anything you want. I don't know, there's not really any production-ready apps with it, but it's pretty much there. They do a weekly blog post as to where they're up to with development. I think they have something like 40 developers working with them on the project. But the hosting model is still in closed alpha. They're doing closed alpha testing, so probably early next year that'll launch.
Sorry, I was wondering how can technology be politicized? I mean, technology is technology. I mean, it may enable human behaviour in certain ways, and that's maybe what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But if human behaviour is not going to change over thousands of years, and people are trying to change it, but with Holo and Holochain, why couldn't, you're talking about just a value exchange system, and why can't anybody with particular
Yep. Like it's an impartial network. Like you can build whatever you want on it. I think just the way it's structured, I feel like it tends towards certain types of applications and models. Like because like if you want to build an for example, like blockchain, if you want to build an extractive model where it's like, okay, I'm going to sell something or I'm going to like speculate on something and there's going to be a return, and therefore you want to have a scarcity factor there. Like you think of everything in our economy right now, its value is basically determined by a scarcity, which is kind of sad. And so, if you want to build a model of scarcity, you would build it on blockchain because that architecture is perfectly suited to it. If you want to build a model of abundance, then the architecture of Holochain is far more suited to that. And so you get different aspects coming out. Like, I definitely think there'll still be the typical, like, hardcore capitalist, exploitive, extractive douchebags who will try to build stuff on Holochain and hopefully it doesn't destroy the culture like it did on blockchain. But I feel like I think that the way the culture is right now, the type of people it's attracted, and I think the type of applications that are being built, and again, because the architecture, facilitates this kind of open, there's no fee at the bottom, there's no hardcore consensus. You can rewrite the rules and the consensus and the security models and the economic models however you want from the base up. So I think it will attract, people who want to make more, like holistic systems, I guess, holistic economies.
I see a bit of like a Cambrian explosion of sort of apps and ideas, and then it's like some will live on because people want to continue using them because they actually work for everyone, but then some will die because people just don't want to use it anymore because it's actually bad overall for everyone. And so a couple of people who want to play that game in a sense, but the ones that are actually good for everyone will stay alive because people want to actually use them.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. Plus, again, that's an architectural thing because that's how the DHTs and stuff work. Is you actually need to be participating in it.
The users are the network. They run. Like if everyone leaves that app, then the app dies essentially. Unlike blockchain, where when you deploy a smart contract, it's there forever. And typically they have these forcing functions with the economic, game theories where it's like you've got to keep playing the game. Like Bitcoin, everyone could just leave Bitcoin tomorrow and it would stop. But the forcing function of economics encourages it to keep going. Awesome.
All right, that's awesome. Round of applause for Nathan. Big glad Skinny's not here because he was definitely just call out what Shanti just said, right? It sounds like communism, right? But this is post-capitalism.
It actually sounds a lot more like the way Linux functions.
Exactly. You see, so we're reaching, as you can see, what is it, the late stage capitalism with all the blockchain initiatives right now. And this is one of the ways to get out of it, right? So thanks again. Thanks. Thanks for round of applause again. And good to be back. So we have more discussions around this, over some wines and beers. How long have we got this place till, Nancy?
Until I kick you out.
All right, that sounds good. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming. I was good as they see it from now. Yeah.
so we can hear everything. But then also as a yeah. Child stalkers.
That's it, right? So we get set up to get around. Yeah, so